This show is sponsored by PowerfulWomenUSA.com. Hey everybody, I'm Jill Conway, and this is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating strong and powerful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping that you will be inspired and you will feel empowered and discover your own power. So my guest today, Dr. Nadine Macaluso, the ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. She is also a psychotherapist, an expert on trauma bonds, relationships, and author of the book Run Like Hell. You saw the movie, everybody. Now hear her story, unedited. Dr. Nadine, thank you for joining me today. Hello?
Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Gosh, you're a powerful woman indeed. You are a survivor of abuse, and then you went back to school. You became a therapist, and now you're helping women who are in toxic relationships. So this is a conversation that everybody needs to hear and have with the women they know in their lives.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. We'll talk about your book because I was talking to you and I read it and it's incredible. And I was telling everyone, you have to read this book, ladies, if you're listening, and your mother has to read it and your daughters have to read it because it's like a guidebook, right? So I want to start first. Dr. Nay, as everyone calls you. Let's start with how you were kind of introduced to the general public, and it's through the movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. Did you see the movie?
Yes. I did see the movie. Paramount was nice enough to offer my current husband and I a private screening, and at their headquarters. So I got to see it, and we were the only two people in the theater. And of course, when I sit down, I'm like, okay, this is a little strange and surreal.
Yeah.
I took a deep breath.
Yep.
But then when I saw the movie, I was like, okay, not so bad.
Okay.
I just looked like a young girl who fell in love and was chasing a crazy guy around.
Well, right. And how do you feel that you were portrayed?
Listen, I got to meet Margot Robbie. That was her first breakout role. They wanted my accent. She was absolutely lovely. She was 22 years old. And listen, the story is not my narrative. It's not through my perspective.
It's all his. It's all one-sided. Let's just let that out there, right?
She did a good job, and she showed me as a strong tour de force, to be reckoned with, which certainly I think I was. That's why I was able to escape and then thrive afterwards. So it doesn't show the depth of my character, but that's okay because it wasn't my story.
Right. So this was all his perspective, his book. He wrote the book.
Exactly.
And now it's time for you to kind of tell your own story, and which you did through your book.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I tell my story through my book in a different way, not where I really talk about my life per se, but I talk about all of the women as a therapist that I deal with who are in trauma bonds. I was in the quintessential trauma bond 25 years ago, unbeknownst to me, because we didn't have words like trauma bonds and narcissism. But what happened when I became a therapist was all these smart, kind, beautiful women were, experiencing coercive control, financial abuse, betrayal, emotional abuse. And I just said, we have a problem.
Right. Well, what exactly, go into the meaning of trauma bonding for people who don't know.
Sure. So a trauma bond at its most basic form is a toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally attached people. Right. So it can be between a parent and a child, a boss and an employee, friends even. The lens I took was between lovers. And it has to have two conditions for it to really be a trauma bond. It has to have a power imbalance. Somebody has to have the power and abuse it.
Right.
And it has to have a behavioral pattern called intermittent reinforcement, where 70% of the time, your pathological partner is cruel, controlling, and callous, right? But that 30% of the time, they're charming and generous and helpful. And that's actually what bonds you to the person, ironically.
Which is so interesting. So in the book, you go through, you talk about different couples, different, clients, cases that you had. And in a few of them, and as you're reading it, you're like, wow, this is powerful. Because And I wanted to read a quote from the book.
Sure.
Because I thought it really hit home for so many women. And on page 31, because women, I want you to buy this book, okay? It's called Run Like Hell. In the chapter, it says, What Your Mother Never Told You. That's the name of the chapter. And it says, the belief that he will change, that things will get better, and the pain will stop is a powerful stimulant of hope for women. Wow. Yeah. Right? Because everyone thinks, he didn't mean it. It'll get better. Right.
Yes. And they also tell us that, right?
Well, tell us. Well, give a scenario. Give a scenario for people listening.
Yeah. So let's say, you find out that your partner betrayed you, sexually, and you confront them, and they say, I'll go to Sex Addicts Anonymous. I'll never do it again. I swear, I'm sorry. I have issues from my childhood that are unresolved. And maybe they go to Sex Addicts Anonymous, but the behavior doesn't change.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And also hope is the hook, because we're so focused on the initial love bombing stage, and we keep hoping they're going to go back to this charming, amazing lover.
Well, you say, because there's all different stages, and I think you spoke about that in your own part of the story of you were swept off your feet. He was Mr. Charming, right? He was this Cinderella or something you quoted, or something, like it was just like this fantasy relationship. Yeah. Talk about that. So that's the beginning of, so many women think this is amazing, right? He is everything. He's everything I ever wanted. And then it turns south.
Yeah. And so then after some time, the mask falls. So I used to call them Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but now I call them Romeo and Dirty John. For my younger audience, they get that more.
Right.
And so in the beginning, he's Romeo, or she, right? It could be a woman too.
Right, exactly.
Mostly it is men. And then the mask starts to fall, and after you've already been put in a trance with all of the love bombing, the mask starts to fall, and you start to say, wait, this isn't the person who presented themselves to me. This is somebody very different. Right.
And then what do you do? Right.
And so what happens is that that the two sides of the mask, it creates something called cognitive dissonance, which is the glue of the trauma bond. And cognitive dissonance simply means we feel discomfort, or we feel totally confused because we're like, wait, is he good or is he bad? Is the relationship good or bad?
Right.
Am I toxic or is he toxic? Am
right.
I crazy? Is he crazy? So you're constantly ping-ponging between these two opposing thoughts that keep you really confused and in a fog.
Well, because they're making it seem probably like it's your fault, right? It's not them, right?
Right.
Like I always hear from women, their spouse or say you're crazy for thinking whatever, and it's and then they think, am I crazy? Is this
right? And that's the gaslighting.
Right. That's wild, right? I mean, it's there was another part that I was telling you earlier. I was on a plane and I was reading the book, and these young ladies next to me were like, "What are you reading?" Because I was taking these notes, and they were like, "Wow, that's incredible." And I said, "You have to read this book because I think you're reading about these couples and what's happening with them, and you're at the same point. It's almost like you're learning." What you don't want and how to see the red flags.
Exactly.
And that's what is so powerful about your book, because you lived it, and now you're like, wait a minute, ladies, hello, here's what to look for. So, because I feel like so many women, they take on the shame of it, and it's not their shame to take.
It's so true. I mean, Jill, that's the whole, not the whole reason, but really one of the motivating forces behind writing my book was the stigma that the victim feels. Like you say, she feels so much shame. How could I have fallen for this? How could I have stayed? And then society shames us too, right? What's wrong with her? Instead of saying, why does he do that? It's more, what's wrong with her? And the shame is debilitating. Right. And I really wanted to break the stigma for the victim and say, guess what? Abuse and manipulation, or like I dealt with a drug addiction too, that was never my fault. That's never your fault. It's always the fault of the abuser.
Right, right. Well, and then
we can't make them do it, right, Jill? Because if we could make them be abusive, then we'd be able to make them stop, and we can't do that either.
Right, right. Well, it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but in part of your book, and I wrote this line down too because it is amazing. You say substance abuse cannot turn a man into an abuser. It brings out what's already there.
That's right.
Boom. Right?
That's right. Yeah, because it gets really tricky when you're dealing with intense substance abuse like I was dealing with. I was so focused on the substance abuse, but there were all of these coercive control behaviors or manipulation or lying or verbal abuse that kind of took a second seat because the drug addiction was so prevalent. But drug and alcohol addiction does not make an abuser. It can exacerbate it, but it doesn't create it.
Which I think so many women say he didn't mean it. He was drunk.
Right.
Right. Or men can be victims too, right? As you mentioned.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
That's right. And that doesn't mean that alcohol or substance doesn't make you act worse. Of course it can, but that's not really the driving force behind the behavior.
Right. And then they make you feel that I'm sure, like, don't tell anybody, right? You feel shame. Oh, you said something in it, like, I think, or women ask like themselves, gosh, I mean, how does a smart woman get themselves in a situation like this? Right. So and automatically they're thinking, well, then I'm not that smart. I don't want to tell anybody, because then they'll be like, well, you're not that smart to get it, but you are. You just kind of, I don't think people recognize those types of relationships until they're well into it.
Exactly. Because, we've been fed this myth of romantic love, that someday our prince is going to come and rescue us and, sweep us off our feet. And, that's not really reality. So when this charming con man presents, you're like, that's it, that's him.
Right.
But sometimes the slow, even-keeled partner ends up actually being a more stable, loving individual.
Right, right. Well, we're talking, I know we, in the book, and you often talk about and what we think of as physical abuse, but there's so many layers of abuse. It's not just layers. It's just not just physical abuse. I mean, it could be, but you can be abused emotionally and psychologically, and where I don't think that's even validated by many people in society either.
Yeah, no, because at the bottom of a trauma bond is control. And you'll hear this word now used a lot in society, and it's called coercive control, which means that the pathological partner is constantly pressuring you to do what they want you to do, to behave how they want you to behave, right? And so the way I describe it is that this person will use, harm, exploit, and betray their lover to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status.
Oh, okay.
And they'll do it through gaslighting, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, betrayal, coercion. And, you can't get arrested for that. And only 5 states right now recognize coercive control as domestic abuse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Because you can hide it.
Right.
Right? It's just his word against hers.
And you have a case study in there where it gets horrible. What a man it turns against the woman and blames it all on her.
That's right. And they love to blame, and they love to be the victim, even though they're the perpetrator. And that's another reason you get so confused, because they're, like you said in the beginning, you made me do it. I'm actually the victim here. And then you start to think, wait, did I?
Right.
But it's all, again, just a manipulative tactic.
Right. Well, because let's face it. I mean, I think as a society, most women are kind of early on, you want to be a people pleaser, right? Because that's kind of what you are taught, try to smooth things over, make things nice. You make sure your family's happy, everything's going smoothly. And at that point, like for you had 2 young kids,
that's right?
So what do you do? Right.
And I'm glad you brought up that point, because, as women, we have been socialized to people please, placate, be the nice, good girl. And guess what? It's fine to be cooperative with people like you and I.
Right, exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to take advantage of it, but in the hands of the wrong person, that actually gets weaponized. Being kind and good gets weaponized. And for me, I did have two little children that were now big adults, but they were 3 and 5 at the time. And I just thought to myself, I got to get out. I got to get out because I can't live this crazy, dysfunctional life, and I had to protect them. And a lot of times women feel like that. It's sometimes easier to leave for your children than yourself.
Right, right. How accurate do you think? I mean, that lifestyle was that really a accurate portrayal of his lifestyle?
So accurate.
Really? Wow. That's something.
It was so accurate. The house, the staff, the yacht, thinking of the yacht.
Right.
Yeah. It was all accurate. Yep. It was, and that's another thing too, right? That causes extreme cognitive dissonance because, I could have a fight with my ex. Really all we fought about was me trying to get him to stop doing so much drugs. And he didn't like that. And we get into a rip-roaring fight, and I was no match for him. I always lost. And then the next day, there'd be a horse in my driveway.
Wow.
Because I like to ride horses,
Right. So he had tried to make it up to you.
Tried to make it up to me. And then, I'm like, wait, is he good or is he bad? No, he just had a bad moment. He just had a bad day.
Right, because he loves me, right? Because he loves
me. Yeah, because they keep telling you that they love you. And that's another thing that I really want women to look out for is that when words don't match actions, that's a red flag.
Right. Well, because we see that portrayed in so many shows, and so I'm sure, so many women's lives, right? The men do this, and hurt them in some way, and then just try to make up for it without maybe even ever saying I'm sorry or
exactly.
And never really. I always say it's a self-reflection thing. Like I don't think they want to ever question themselves and say, why did I do that? Right. They're not taught to do that.
No. And they don't have really like that reflective capacity often that you talk about where if, I do something wrong, I'm like, oh, that wasn't great. I need to apologize. Right. They don't have remorse, empathy, or compassion. So on top of how they hurt you, there's really no resolution because they can't receive your pain.
Right.
Say they're sorry.
Right. So what do? Right. They just either probably gloss over it.
On a trip.
Right. Right.
Say they're never going to do it again, go to work, and then you're back in the loop.
Well, how often did that circle keep happening, that merry-go-round for you?
Oh, I think I have one chapter getting off the merry-go-round of Dysfunction Junction or something like that. It happens a lot.
Right.
Too many to count.
And because you were married, 14 years?
I was married 8 years.
8 years. Oh, okay. 8 years to him. But you knew him for, well, that's another thing about a trauma bond. We met. 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months later, we were married. So they move at warp speed. Right. Wow. Right. Because you're everything and they want to, right, I guess, before you can find out what they're really like.
That's what I think. Back then, my ex was like, if you don't marry me, I'm not going to date you. And I was like, wait, I don't want to get married. I'm 23.
You're so
young.
And
then if you don't have kids right away, I'm not going to marry you. So that dominating coercion was happening right from the beginning. But as a 22-year-old girl, I was like, I would fight back because I didn't want to get married. I was too young. And my parents had gotten divorced when I was young. And so I just didn't want to do that. But he had a different mission. And then I was like, oh, he just loves me so much. That's what it is.
Oh, gosh. There's so much more to talk about. So stay with us. Dr. Nay, stay with us.
Okay. Yeah.
We will be back with Dr. Nadine Macaluso. She is the ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street and the author of Run Like Hell. And she's a phenomenal marriage and relationship therapist as well. So that's coming up after the break. Be sure to head to her website, drnay.com. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Join our community. Head to Powerful Women USA for more information. Stay with us. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Dr. Nadine Macaluso is here. She's marriage and relationship therapist. She's author of Run Like Hell and the ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street. And she is back with us right now. Hi, Dr. Nay.
Hello.
Hi. So I wanted to, your book is amazing. And again, I've been saying this, every woman needs to read this, every daughter, every mother, every grandmother. You say in the book, nearly 20 people per minute are victims of family and domestic violence. 1 in 4 women experience intimate partner violence, which is not just physical. Sometimes it can be verbal and coercive. But if you can talk to that about why can it be so hard for a woman to leave a relationship like this?
Yeah, so it's so hard for so many reasons. First of all, like we talked about, hope is the hook. Mm. You believe that you met your soulmate. This person presented to you that they're the sun and the moon and everything else. And so you keep hoping that they're going to go back to that amazing person that you met. And then you could be financially dependent upon them, right?
Right.
When you love somebody, you're emotionally dependent upon them. So we know that. And then the cognitive dissonance that I spoke about earlier, where because this pathological partner is Romeo and Dirty John, so you're always thinking, is he good, is he bad, is the relationship good or bad, am I crazy or is he crazy? Cognitive dissonance is really the glue of the trauma bond. It's what keeps you stuck, because they can be so cruel and mean, but like we talked, the next day they can be so nice. So I would say it's a mixture of confusion, hope, and dependency.
Which is, so, and you want to trust. But that's the thing.
Yeah, you want to trust.
Right? You want to be in a relationship where you give it your all and you have a mutual love. Right. And it's so, but these people don't want to, right? They're not willing to do that. Right. So the abusers. So what a kind of woman, what's the personality of a woman who is often in these types of relationships?
Yeah. So this is interesting because, when we used to think about domestic violence shelters, right? That's how we used to think about domestic violence, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't think about it across all socioeconomic status. And so there was this whole belief that women that, were in trauma bonds or experienced domestic violence, they had horrible childhoods, they had a bad picker. Mm-hmm. And so what the research has shown is that's just not true. First of all, what I want to say is anybody and everybody can fall prey to this. I've worked with famous celebrities, to teachers, to lawyers, to doctors, to reporters, to housewives, right? Mm-hmm. So anybody can fall prey to it. But I read a book in 2019 by Sandra Brown called Women Who Love Psychopaths. And it's a great title. And she had done research, and what she discovered was that there's a personality assessment that we really use in psychology, and it's called the Big Five.
Okay.
It tests for openness, neuroticism, extroversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Oh. And what the research showed, now her research, she's been doing this for 30 years, was that women who scored very high and agreeableness and conscientiousness were perfect prey for these people.
Interesting.
And that's because what happened is that when you're very agreeable, what are you? You're tolerant, you're loyal, you're cooperative, you're pro-social. When you're conscientious, you're driven, you have integrity, you'll do anything to make things work and see things through. So if a woman comes to me with these characteristics, and I assess every woman for it, and I have an assessment for it on my website, I'm not going to say to them, get rid of them. They're great traits, but in the hands of a pathological person, they get weaponized.
Right. So what do?
Right. First of all, you have to know your personality traits, right?
Right.
And that's one of the things when I work with all the women I work with, I'm like, okay, you've been so obsessed about your partner. You have to turn the mirror back on you and get to know you, because I score very high in both of those traits. So it's not a surprise I got my PhD and I'm a therapist.
Right. So after you went through all of this and you left, and you had to start over, so did you have to go through that process too, where you had to really peel back the onion and see why you were feeling the way you did and why you behaved and allowed? Yeah.
After I left my ex, I went to a program for a week called Breakthrough at the Karen Foundation, where I learned about how to set boundaries. I didn't know. You have to remember, this was 25 years ago.
Sure.
I didn't know you could say no.
Right.
I didn't know I could set boundaries, right? I didn't know I could be assertive and still be loved. And so I learned about all of these things. Now, back then, though, nobody was really talking about this. So they were just like, you're codependent and he's an addict.
Right.
And I just thought to myself, there's got to be something more here. But again, we weren't talking about this.
Right. And people just stayed in marriages, unhappy marriages. People just stayed in them because that's what you were expected.
We weren't looking at it, Jill, like through this lens that we're looking at it right now.
Right. Well, it's almost like we weren't taught to, right?
Right.
Just put up with it.
Just put up with it. Yeah. Other people, I'll never forget, even when I told one of my neighbors in Brookville when I was leaving, not that much older woman than me. I was, 30, 31. She's like, oh, don't leave. Everybody's the same. And I was like, I don't think so.
Right. Wow. I mean, well, let's, you know what, something you had said or posted, you've gone back to see the house kind of, what was that like? And you lived in Brookville, you said, yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Brookville. It was wild. It definitely seems like another lifetime ago, and the house is beautiful. And I'm so detached from it when I look at it now, but I went back and filmed it because it's such a beautiful house. Mm-hmm. And just what looks, I say is all that glitters isn't gold.
Right. The horrors that were going on behind those doors, right?
That's right.
Wow. And I'm sure, did you, when you chose to leave him, Jordan, were people saying you're crazy for leaving him? Like, what are you, crazy?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nobody really said that because his drug addiction had gotten so out of control.
Wow.
And so all of our friends and family had witnessed that. Mm-hmm. And so nobody was shocked. And then once he got arrested, that's when I finally left him. And, like the trolls on the internet will be like, oh, you left him because he lost his money. And I'm like, no.
Right.
I left him because I was safe. He had an ankle bracelet.
Right. Well, you loved him, right? I mean, you obviously loved him. You were with him.
Oh, of course, yeah. And there are two beautiful children with him.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But I left because I was safe. And, that's why I write in the book, I didn't leave the right way. Mm-hmm. I confronted him too much and told him, and that we would get into more fights, because that's often the most dangerous time is when a woman says she's going to leave.
Right.
So I have a rule: don't ever let them see you coming.
Meaning what? What does that mean?
You can't say to them, once a woman internally makes a decision inside of herself, like, I've had it, I'm done.
Sure.
Tell your friend, tell your therapist, tell your family, tell somebody you trust, but you can't tell them. You have to plan behind the scenes.
Okay. Right.
Now you have to wear the mask, because if you tell somebody whose whole mission in life is to control you that you're leaving, what do you think they're going to do?
Right.
They're going to go crazy.
Right. That's right. Because you know what? Because it's funny you wrote, and I picked up a lot of different quotes from your book because it's that good. You wrote that over time, women, perhaps even you, have become their lover's safety blanket and punching bag. And the woman's hook, as you said, is hope for true love. And what type of person promises to love and trust and then is cruel, deceptive, and controlling? Right? I mean, that's like probably like what goes through every single woman's mind. Like, and then how do you love someone like that? Right. Because then,
right. And I think what happens over time, which is fortunate, I fell out of love.
Right. Well, how could you not? Right. You weren't.
Right. And I always say that, I had 3 last straws because women have last straws. When I got kicked down the stairs, when I confronted him about his drug addiction right before he got sober, which he did get sober. Then when I said to him, hey, that really hurt, all of everything we went through with the abuse and the addiction. And he said to me, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, wow.
So that's that lack of remorse. And then the third was when he got arrested. Then finally I'm like, okay, I'm out.
Right. Now, did you have any contact with him after that? Did he try calling you from, prison or whatever?
He did. Yeah, he didn't want it to end. But luckily he was so also really wrapped up with the government and the FBI.
A little bit.
And that was like the least of his problems at that point.
Right.
And the nice part about Jordan and I do want to say this, we do have a good relationship and we are good parents.
Oh, so now that's wow, that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's great for our kids. You know, my daughter's a therapist. My son is, a businessman and a musician, and they're 29 and 31, and they have a great relationship with their dad, and they're my best friends, and so we all came out the other side after a lot of therapy.
Well, that is kudos to you, I'm sure. That's a big deal for you
That's what his mother said. Yeah. That's what his mother said.
Yeah, for you to help with that. So, I mean, because... Yeah. Because so many women, you want to tell them to like tell your kids what your father was like, but
right.
I mean, I guess you if you want to have a relationship or want them to have a relationship with that person, it's kind of hard.
Yeah, like I would tell them the facts. Your dad was abusive and was a drug addict, but I didn't say your dad's a jerk. I didn't
right.
that name calling.
Yeah. So you do have, is it an assessment or a quiz?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So
I have a trauma bond assessment. It's in my book, but it's also on my website, and I'll read a few of the questions.
Yeah.
And there's 15 questions.
Okay. And how many, all right, so if someone's listening and they're starting to, how many?
I would say if you say yes to 7 out of 15, run like hell.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's go. Go ahead.
Here we go. I feel confused about our relationship because I love my partner but also fear him.
Ooh.
It's hard to leave my abusive lover because I feel emotionally or financially dependent on them. Mm-hmm. My friends and family worry about my well-being in this relationship and tell me you don't seem like yourself. My partner states he will change or do better but never does. There is crazy-making communication that never resolves the issues in my relationship. I keep hoping the fights will stop if I love better.
Oh. Wow.
So those are the first 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, because as people pleasers, we feel like we can heal them, we can fix them.
Yes.
Isn't that? Oh, wow. Again, we're taking the responsibility, as you said before, onto ourselves. Like it's something we can, and it's them.
Right.
It's them. Right.
It's like there's a great narcissism expert, Dr. Ramani, and she wrote a book called "It's Not You." It just came out.
Well, I mean, so you would say Jordan was a narcissist. I mean, I don't know that you can change completely, but yeah. And then you talk about that in the book too. And, which is, it's just a power play. They just want to control you, really. I mean, which is crazy. It's crazy. So, all right. So I know, I mean, you're not giving, therapist advice on a specific person's case, but how do women leave safely? Like how does that happen?
So I and this is important because, like I mentioned before, when a woman wants to leave, that can really be a very dangerous time because you're saying to the person who wants to control you, adios, and they're not going to like that. So what I say is you put on the mask. You don't let them know that you want to leave. And prepare. Please get a therapist if you can, so you have somebody to confide in. I would tell one friend or two people, not a lot. I wouldn't tell a lot of people that you're thinking of leaving. Get very educated, right? Read my book, go on the internet, and then start to plan. Make sure you have a credit card in your name. Make sure you have all your important documents. Set up your own bank account if you don't have one. Just start to set it up so that when you do finally say, hey, I'm leaving, you have it all set up, because they're going to go nuts and cut off credit cards and block out bank accounts and threaten you and dominate. So you really need to be prepared before you leave. Right.
Well, I mean, you said the healing process is a very lengthy one when you're in this, right? After you come out of that, can you talk about that a little bit? Because you help people now do that, right?
Right. So so the whole third part of my book is all about post-traumatic growth. And the research shows that especially women that have experienced domestic violence or trauma bonds, 75% of them can grow from it. Meaning that because nobody comes to therapy like, hey, Dr. Nay, I'm having a great day. How are you? People come to therapy when they're on their knees.
Right.
Right. And so the body and brain grow from threat. And so it's a great time to go to therapy, become self-reflective, and really start to learn about yourself. What are your attachment patterns? What are your personality traits, right? Who are you?
Right.
Can you set boundaries? Start to really learn about yourself. And, if you're not working, find something that you can build your confidence up with, right? And right when you leave, the most important thing is to stabilize with self-care, because you have experienced trauma. So how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Are you getting enough exercise? So you stabilize with that, and then you start to learn about yourself. And please don't isolate.
So stay with people.
You stay connected to people.
Why is that common? Is that common for women to do?
It's very common, because they isolate you in the trauma bond, and then you kind of continue that due to shame and overwhelm. But it's really important, because we can't grow resilience alone in our home.
Right. Right.
We have to reach out.
You talk often in the book about self-compassion, because it's so hard for women to really be compassionate for themselves.
It's so hard.
Why is that?
It's so hard.
Yeah. We don't. It's just women just don't feel like they're worthy of it, of true love, or of kindness, love.
We all have such harsh inner critics. You should have known better. You should have done better. And when you've been abused and lied and betrayed, you don't need to beat yourself up. That's already happened. So self-compassion is, really speaking to yourself like you would a good friend.
Right.
And being kind with yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Exactly. Right. And I just don't feel like we're not taught to do that either. We're harsh on the other women, and we're harsh on ourselves.
Yeah. And that doesn't, criticism doesn't breed growth.
Right.
You criticize the child all day, they would not grow into healthy adults.
So now
you have to have self-compassion.
So now you are married. You are remarried.
Yeah.
For many years.
Yeah, for 23 years on September 29th.
Wow. Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
But how difficult was that then to recognize a healthy relationship? And that's a good question too. What is a healthy relationship?
Some green flags. Yeah. So the first thing is people like, oh, how do you trust? Well, first of all, you have to learn to trust yourself, right? To trust yourself to see the red flags, to trust your intuition, to be brave enough to say, hey, this isn't a good date, I'm out. And so when I met my second husband and we had our first conversation, and it was like a dialogue because we didn't agree about something, and he goes, yeah, I hear that. I understand. And I was like, what?
Wow. Right.
Yeah, I couldn't, because I say if somebody can't hear you, they can't love you.
Right. Well, they're not listening, right?
They're not listening. I was shocked. And so we, of course, the course of true love never did run smooth. It's not like it's perfect, but we're both willing to change and grow for each other.
Well, was it hard for you to realize to be in a healthy relationship? I know that sounds like a weird question, but it's almost like, are you trying to self-sabotage yourself too? And like, this can't,
that can be very, very, very common. And I'm sure it was so long ago in the beginning.
Right.
I definitely had moments, where I wanted to run away, or I thought this, I don't know if I could do this.
Right. You're scared. I mean, you're scared. You have to be scared.
It's scary, after you've been hurt by somebody that you supposedly loved and they loved you. But, time and time again, when that person keeps showing up for you, right, again, trust has to be earned. It can't just be given.
Right.
And he earned my trust.
Right. And that's everything. That's everything.
That's everything.
Yeah. So we only have about a minute and a half left, but I mean, so women, you can leave those toxic relationships and you can go on to find a great love.
Yes. And don't, and look for the helpers, right? I always want to say this. There's nothing to be ashamed about. So many women have gone through this, and reach out for help, right? Like anything, go on the internet, reach out to a friend, tell a family member, like really explain to somebody what's happening. And you'd be shocked about how the wheels just get in motion. And you can definitely recover if you've been in one. That's a fact.
Oh, yes, you can heal. Women, you all deserve to be loved the right way.
That's right. You deserve to be loved. We all deserve to be loved simply just for being born. We're worthy of love.
All right. All right. So that's the end of our show. A big thank you to Dr. Nadine Macaluso. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jill, for having me. Have a great night.
Oh, you too. And if you want more information about Dr. Nadine's book, Run Like Hell, go to her website, drnade.com, and pick up her book and read more about it. It's a magical, magical guidebook. All right. So you've been listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. I'm Jill Conway. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next time.